Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Tarun Kumar Vashisht. I am Assistant Professor at University Business School, Punjab University Regional Centre, Ludhiana, Punjab. Students, we are here to discuss module number 37, that is Strategic Management in Public Sector, from the paper Strategic Management under the subject Management. So students, after listening to my talk and after going through the e-text corresponding to it, you should be able to understand the concept of public sector undertakings, the evolution of public sector undertakings in India, the classification of public sector companies or undertakings suggested by the government, the objectives and role of public sector companies in the development, or I should say overall development of India, and then the strategic decision, that is disinvestment, and the policy thereof of the government to the public sector undertakings, and finally the limitations of public sector undertakings. So students, let's introduce the topic now. Public sector companies have been providing industrial, economic, social, and therefore overall development to any nation in general and India in particular. It is a kind of instrument in the hands of government to provide strategic direction to a nation. Because many a times what happens is that private sector has its own goal of profit motives, but then public sector plays a distinct role of overall development of a particular nation in long run. Now students, public sector undertakings in India are government owned enterprises having the majority of paid up share capital, that is 51% or more. And this particular arrangement provides government to decide upon the strategic direction of public sector undertakings. So in India, what was done is that the need was understood of heavy industry and other basic industries, and corresponding public sectors were established after the independence in the corresponding areas. Now we must appreciate that India is an agricultural dominant nation. So specifically, public sector banks, that is PSBs, provided loans to agricultural areas, say to farmers and other diverse stakeholders in the agricultural areas or agricultural sector, through, say, providing it through priority sector arrangements. Yes, so there are different areas in which government provide loans with priority sectors, and these priority sectors are changed time to time. Now, Controller General of India is the agency that is responsible for the audit of such government companies. Now this is very important, friends. And this Controller General of India, it appoints the auditor and decides the way in which the audit will be done. Now, throughout this module of public sector undertakings, we would see that the role of public sector undertakings has been changing, or I should say transforming, from whenever we got our independence, and now we are considered as one of the great nations in the map of the world. So this was all about introduction. So students, next we must discuss the evolution of public sector in India. Friends, when we achieved our independence, India was dominantly an agrarian country, or it was having agriculture sector in dominance. So some eminent industrialists and economists in 1944 and 45, they came together and came up with a document called the Bombay Plan. The Bombay Plan actually puts their intentions into the world that the government should come forward to regulate and develop the industries in India. Then in 1948 came the first industrial policy resolution, and the things were taken as legal that the government will be the custodian of overall industrial development. Now, our first Prime Minister, Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, put India onto the track of mixed economy as the economic pattern of Indian economy. And most of the areas, or I must say strategic and core areas, were put into the domain of government to develop those. But yes, up to some extent the private sector was also allowed to contribute in the industrial development. In March 1950, commission was established. Now, planning commission was a great work of I should say execution, because it provided eventually the strategic direction. And the chairman of the planning commission was the then Prime Minister of India, and the legacy was put forward ultimately. Now, in 1951, Industrial Development and Regulation Act came into force, and then that particular act put everything into legislature. And after everything was put into legislature, the development of public sector companies was started. The second 5-year plan, that is from 1956 to 1960, and second Industrial Policy Resolution 1956, it classified industries into 3 schedules. The first schedule, that is Schedule A, was the overall responsibility of the government, and the participation of private sector was banned. Now, the question with you could be that why was it banned for private sector? It is a legitimate question. Now, the answer is that this area was so much strategic, say defense. Private sector was not allowed to get into it. The second schedule, that is Schedule B, consisted of the industrial areas where government played a dominant role, but up to some extent the private sector also participated, or it was encouraged to participate. The third schedule encompassed the industries or industrial areas where these industries were left for private sector to operate. Now, here it differentiates between actually the say capitalistic form of economy or the communistic form of economy, and we are lying in between, that is mixed economy, where public sector has a greater role to play, but yes, private sector also plays a role. Then in 1969, in the regime of Indira Gandhi, 14 public sector banks were nationalized. Yes, so they were actually private sector banks, but they eventually were nationalized. And again, following in 1982, 6 more banks were nationalized. Now, in 1993, New India Bank was merged with the Punjab National Bank. Until 2000, we just had 19 public sector banks, nationalized banks. In 1970 came the industrial policy on licensing. And we said that the large undertakings belonging to large business groups will be restricted for some particular areas of operations. Why? Because in India, the political force didn't want that there should be any monopoly existing. In 1973, the Monopolistic and Restrictive Trade Practices, that is MRTP Act, came into place, and we said that the industrial establishments belonging to industrial houses having more than 200 million rupees will be considered as large business houses and will be restricted on certain areas of operation. So students, through 1960s, 70s and 80s, the public sector industry actually dominated industrial establishments of India. But in 1991, we struck a particular, I should say, financial crisis. And after that, the industrial policy or the perspective was just reversed. and we saw that it is the time to disinvestment in our public sector companies. So friends, after 1991, since till the day, we have been divesting or disinvesting in the public sector areas, public sector undertakings, and on the other hand, we are investing in some other strategic public sector undertakings. This has been done to make our public sector stand in the global era. So this was all about the evolution of public sector companies or undertakings in India.
Okay, students, let us now talk about the classification of public sector undertakings in India. Public sector undertakings can be classified into the following categories. Number one, the public sector enterprises. Number two, central public sector enterprises. And number three, public sector banks. The central public sector enterprises are further classified into strategic and non-strategic areas of the strategic CPSEs are as follows. Number one is the arms and ammunition and the allied items of defense equipments, defense aircrafts and warships. The second one is atomic energy, except in the areas related to the operation of nuclear power and applications of the radiations and radioisotopes to agriculture, medicine, and non-strategic industries. And the third one is the railway transports. All other CPSEs are considered as non-strategic. Section 8 companies. Public sector enterprises having objects to promote charity, commerce, science, art, religion, or any other useful purpose and not having any profit motive whatsoever can be registered as non-profit company under Section 8 of the New Companies Act 2013. This section empowers the central government to grant a license directing that such an association may be registered as a company with limited liability without the addition of words limited or private limited to its name. Such companies are also known as the non-profit or no-profit, no-loss companies. Maharatna, Navratna, Miniratna status for the public sector undertakings. The status of Maharatna, Navratna, Miniratna to CPSEs is conferred by the Department of Public Enterprises to various public sector undertakings. These prestigious statuses provide them the greater autonomy to compete with the conglomerates in the global market. Let us talk about the Maharatnas first. To qualify for the Maharatnas status, a company should have an average annual turnover of rupees 20,000 crores during the previous 3 years, and the average annual net worth of the company should be rupees 10,000 crore. The Maharatna status empowers a company to expand its operations and emerge as global giant. The status empowers the company's board to take investment decisions up to rupees 5,000 crore without taking government approval. The Maharatna companies are free to decide on investments in a project up to 15% of their net worth with an absolute ceiling of rupees 5,000 crores. Navratna. The CPSEs fulfilling the following criteria are eligible to be considered for grant of Navratna status. A CPSEs having Schedule A and a Mini Ratna Category 1 status, or a CPSE having at least 3 excellent or very good MOU ratings in the previous 5 years. The Navratna status empowers a company to invest up to rupees 1,000 crore or 15% of their net worth, which is lower on a single project without taking government approval. These companies can spend up to 30% of their net worth with an absolute limit of 1000 crore. In a year, a Navratna company also enjoys the freedom to enter into a joint ventures, to form alliances, and to establish subsidiaries abroad. Mini Ratna category. For Mini Ratna category 1 status, a CPSE must be profitable in the last 3 years continuously. The pre-tax profit must be rupees 30 crores or more in at least one of the 3 years and must have a positive net worth. For category 2, the CPSE must be profitable for the last 3 years continuously and must have a positive net worth. A mini Ratna company can enter into a joint ventures, set up subsidiaries and overseas offices after satisfying certain conditions. This designation applies to PSCs that are profitable continuously for the previous 3 years or earned a net profit of rupees 30 crore or more in one of the 3 years. Mini Ratna Category 2. Category 2 Mini Ratna companies have the autonomy to incur the capital expenditure up to rupees 300 crore or up to 50% of their net worth, whichever is lower, without the government approval. Objectives of public sector undertakings. The public sector undertakings have been set up to achieve the following objectives. Number one, to promote the rapid and sustainable economic development through creation and expansion of infrastructure. Number two, to generate and invest financial resources for the development. Number three, to promote redistribution of income and wealth to diverse section of the society. Number four, to create employment opportunities in the tune to eradicate poverty and bring prosperity. Number five, to promote the balanced regional growth to encourage the growth and development of cottage, small scale, and ancillary industries. And the next one is to maintain the balance of payments. Role of public sector undertakings. The public sector plays a vital role in economic development of any nation in general. Public sector is considered a powerful engine of economic development and one of the most important instruments of the self-reliance and sustainability. Public sector helped India emerge as a large economy on the world map. The major contributions of public sector enterprises to a country's economy may be discussed as follows. Filling the gaps in the capital goods. At the time of independence, crucial gaps were there in the industrial infrastructure of India, specifically in the area of heavy industries such as iron and steel, heavy machinery, exploration and refining of oil, heavy electrical equipments, chemicals and fertilizers, defense equipments, etc. Public sector helped to fill up these big gaps. The production of strategic capital goods helped build the basic infrastructure required for the rapid industrial growth. Therefore, the public sector has almost single-handedly widened the industrial base of the country. Employment. Public sector in India has created zillions of jobs to tackle unemployment. Public sector accounts for around two-thirds of the total employment in the organized sector in the India. The public sector has protected the employment of innumerable people by taking over sick units. Public sector has also contributed towards improving the living and working conditions of workers by setting benchmarks. Balanced regional development. Public sector undertakings have set up their plants in backward and underdeveloped parts of the country. These areas were in the want of basic civic facilities and industrial infrastructure like electricity, wholesome water supply, and progressive townships. Public enterprises have been developing these facilities and bringing about a major transformation in the socio-economic life of the people in these areas. Steel plants of Bhilai, Rourkela, and Durgapur are few examples of developing backward regions by the public sector undertakings. Contribution to the public exchequer. Public sector undertakings have been making substantial contribution to the government exchequer through the payment of excise duty, corporate taxes, custom duty, etc. In this way, PSUs help mobilize funds for financing the schemes for the planned development of the nation. Of late, the contribution from the PSUs has increased considerably. Export promotion and foreign exchange earnings. The State Trading Corporation, the Minerals and Metals Trading Corporation, Hindustan Steels Limited, Bharat Electronics Limited, the Hindustan Machine Tools, etc., have done tremendously well in export promotion. The foreign exchange earnings of the PSUs have been rising consistently. Import substitution. Some PSUs were started specifically to produce goods that were formerly imported and thus have saved the foreign exchange. The Hindustan Antibiotics Limited, the Indian Drugs and Pharmaceuticals Limited, the Oil and Natural Gas Commission, the Indian Oil Corporation, the Bharat Electronics Limited, etc., have saved foreign exchange by way of import substitution. Research and development. PSUs have undertaken research and development programs in a big way. Public sector has laid strong and wide base for self-reliance and sustainability in the field of technical know-how, maintenance of sophisticated industrial plants, machinery and equipment through the development of advanced technologies. PSUs have reduced our dependence on the foreign know-how. Additionally, the public sector has played significant role in the achievement of constitutional goals like reduction of concentration of economic power, increase in public control on the economy, and creation of a socialistic society, etc.
Now, students, this is the time to discuss disinvestment in public sector companies or undertakings, that is PSUs, and it was a strategic move. Friends, in 1991, when the Statement of Industrial Policy came into existence, or we made it, it was observed that the capital employed in the public sector companies was not given any kind of positive return. The GDP was hampered, and the national gross savings were again hampered up to the tune of, say, 10 to 15% because of the poor performance of public sector undertakings. Now, friends, we must appreciate that the public sector undertakings were overstaffed with the people actually not required. There was no proper human resource planning. Why? Because in 1950s, 60s, 70s, when we established such corporation, we did it to provide, say, employment to the poor people of the country. But then after 1991, when we opened the economy after going for the policy of, say, liberalization and privatization, globalization, it was very much important that the role of such public sectors must change. Where earlier the role of public sector was just to develop India, now after 1991, the role changed to become productive so that they could compete with the best of the firms globally. Now, there were certain practices, say VRS, that is voluntary retirement scheme, launched by the government, but they were not successful. So in 1991, the government thought that this is the time to disinvestment or divest these public sector companies. Now in India, the government has been sticking to the policy that it would disinvestment, say, the minority share, say just 5% or 10% maximum. It has happened in many ways. The companies or public sector companies are coming up with IPOs, that is initial public offering, or FPOs, that is follow on public offerings, and getting into equity market. Now it is actually resolving one more problem of which was faced by India, that the income was disparate. The income, there was a disparity between the income of poor people and very rich people in India. Now through these IPOs and FPOs, the shares of these public sector companies have been distributed among the public of India with having diverse ownership. And on the other hand, this disinvestment is actually shaping the other public sector companies with more funds. So the government is taking out some funds from some of the public sectors and putting that particular fund into the new public sector so that to develop them. So we have been doing these kind of disinvestments. We have done it in rural electrification of India, Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited. If you are interested in stock market, you would see ONGC into the market, and then NTPC. So there are many, say HPCL, BPCL, IOCL, Oil India. So there are n number of public sector companies, and there will be more public sector companies in the future which will be divested. Friends, I would like to mention that in the regime of Atal Bihari Vajpayee in 1999 to 2004, for the first time in India, Disinvestment Ministry was a separate independent ministry which was again merged with the say Finance Ministry for taking such decisions. So it was a bit about the disinvestment approach of, or the disinvestment perspective of the government on these public sector undertakings.
Now, after discussing the concept of disinvestment, let us now talk about the approaches to disinvestment. From the perspective of the seller, that is the government, there are three basic different approaches to the disinvestments. Number one is minority disinvestment. In a minority disinvestment, the government retains a majority stake in the undertaking, typically greater than 50%, thus ensures the management control. The present policy statement maintains that all disinvestments will only be minority disinvestments through public offers. Examples of minority sales via auctioning to institutions were Andrew Yule and Company Limited, CMC Limited, etc. Examples of minority sales through offer for the sale include the issue of Power Grid Corporation of India Limited, Coal India Limited, NTPC Limited, NHPC Limited, etc. Majority disinvestment. A majority disinvestment is the one in which the government retains a minority stake in the company, that is, it sells off a majority stake. Historically, majority disinvestment have been typically made to the strategic partners. These partners could be other CPSCs themselves, a few examples being BRPL to IOC, MRL to IOC, KRL to BPCL. Alternatively, these can be private entities like the sales of Morton Foods to Hindustan Leveler, Balco to Sterlite, CMC to TCS, etc. The next approach to the disinvestment can be a complete privatization. Complete privatization is a step or a type of majority disinvestment wherein whole of the stake, that is 100% of the control of an undertaking, is passed on to a buyer. Examples include 18 hotel properties of ITDC and 3 hotel properties of HCI. In loose terms, disinvestment and privatization are used interchangeably. Still, there is a subtle difference between the two. Disinvestment may or may not result in privatization. When the government retains 26% of the shares carrying voting powers while selling the remaining to a strategic buyer, it would have disinvested, but would not have privatized, because with 26% it can still stall vital decisions for which generally a special resolution with 3/4 majority is required.
Friends, I have put a very small topic is it the right time to disinvestment in public sector companies? Now, I would put light on that. You must know that in 2007-8 there was a recession all over the world, and the equity markets were historically low. Now, after 2009, we have been achieving yet new heights in equity markets. And friends, when equity market overall grows, it actually helps the stocks of different companies to have better prices. Now, I would say that this actually is the right time for the government to disinvest in these public sectors. But here, I would like to put forward the view of international economists. They say that in India, they say that they are disinvesting in these public sector companies, but then what is the tune of such disinvestment? It is just 10% or so. It won't help these companies, because with such low disinvestment, private sector would not be able to put their terms and conditions, and the government will just carry on whatever it is carrying on. So it is the time to change our approach for the disinvestment, and we should disinvest some of the public sectors so that they could be privatized and better managed.
Limitations of public sector undertakings. Despite their impressive role, public enterprises in India suffer from several problems and shortcomings. Some of these are described below. Number one, the poor project planning. Disinvestment decisions and project execution in many PSUs are not based upon proper analysis of the demand and supply, cost benefit analysis, and technical feasibility. Lack of a rational criteria and flaws in planning have caused undue delays and inflated costs in commissioning of the projects. Many projects in the public sector have not been finished within time deadlines. The next one is the overcapitalization. Due to ineffective financial planning and control and easy money from the government, many of the public enterprises suffer from the overcapitalization. Such overcapitalization results in high capital output ratio and wastage of scarce capital resources. The next limitation can be discussed as excessive overheads. Public sector undertakings incur heavy expenditure on overheads such as townships, schools, hospitals, etc. In many cases, such expenditures amount to 10% of the total project cost. Repeated expenditure is required for the maintenance of such welfare facilities. Such amenities are desirable, but the expenditure must not be unreasonably high. Overstaffing. Human resource planning in PSUs has not been effective, so a good number of public enterprises have excessive manpower. Recruitment is not based on the sound labor demand overcasting. On the other hand, post of the CEOs etc. remains unfilled for the years despite the availability of the competent personnel. Underutilization of the capacity. In the absence of defined goals of production, effective production planning and control, and proper forecasting of future needs, many PSUs have failed to make optimal use of their fixed assets. In many cases, productivity is low because of improper materials management and or poor inventory control. Lack of the proper price policy. Public enterprises are expected to achieve diverse socio-economic objectives, and pricing decisions are not always based on the rational analysis. Moreover, there is a lack of cost consciousness, quality control, and effective waste management. And the last limitation can be described as inefficient management. Inept management, uninspiring leadership, excessive centralization, and lack of personal drive leads to low managerial efficiency and effectiveness. Civil servants deputed to manage PSUs often lack proper training, and use bureaucratic style of management. Moreover, ineffective delegation of authority hampers the decisions making process. Lack of appropriate incentives adds salt to the injury.
Friends, to sum up, I would say that public sector undertakings play a strategic role, and they had been playing a strategic role in the development of any economy and in India in particular. But we'll have to emphasize that the role of such public sector companies changes with the passage of time. Say in 1950s 60s, the role was to provide, say, a solution for the problem of disparity of income, or maybe to develop the infrastructure. But these days the role is very much different, and our economy is open. Say in the case of BHEL, there are new private sector companies like Larsen and Toubro or Siemens which are putting competition for BHEL. So the role has been changed. The companies must be more and more productive, but yes, they will always play a strategic role in the future also with their changing role. So the time has come to challenge our public sector companies with yet new journey. Thank you very much.